Hey guys, welcome to part 1 of my sewing series, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to sew on a button. Now, I'm going to be facing my camera down so you guys can see my workplace a bit better, so my head might be a bit out of frames at time. So there's a few things you should know about sewing before you go and just sew on a button, which I made my own, by the way, out of cardboard so you guys can see it a bit better. Now, on every needle there's something called an eye hole. It's the part where the yarn is through it, so you can't quite see it right now because, well, my yarn is through it, and the yarn is taking up the whole length of the hole, but it is just a thin, small hole at the end of your needle, so that way you can go and you can put your thread, your string, your yarn, whatever medium you decide to use, you put it through it. Now, once you decide what you want to use, what you're sewing, etc., you take your thread of choice. In this case, I chose yarn, again, to be a bit larger for you guys to see it better. You take it and you just pull out however much you think you'll need. Now, it's always better to pull out more than to pull out less because you can always cut off that extra string, but you cannot add extra string on when you are going and you are sewing. So if you run out of string, you just have to restart rather than being able to just cut some off. So since I'm just sewing on my button, I don't need that much, so I just cut a little bit of yarn off. Now, once you've got your length of string and you've cut it to your desired size, you feed it through your eye hole and then you loop it around so your string is folded in half across your eye hole, and you just tie a little knot at the end. Now, this knot is what holds the string together, and when you pull it through the fabric, it's supposed to stop at the fabric to prevent your string from going all the way through, and that's how you always are going to be starting whatever you're sewing. So it's important that that knot is thicker than the thickness of your needle itself. So I have a pretty thick needle here. Luckily, yarn is pretty thick, so I only had to do one tie to get it, but you'll have to keep tying that until your knot is thicker than the needle, so that way when you pull it through the fabric, the knot does just not go just right through the hole that your needle has created. Now, we're actually going to get on to the sewing aspect at this point. So I have my button here, and you have your fabric. I just have a little strip of fabric. Oops, I just have a little strip of fabric for visual sake. Now, where you don't need the button at this point, so where you started is really all up to you, so I'm just going to poke it right on through. Now, I have my knot in the back piece of my fabric. This is that way this clunky knot that I just created isn't on the front of my garment, isn't showing. It's just a much nicer presentation, so you do not technically have to do it that way, but it does make your piece that you're sewing look much nicer. Now, I've started where I want it, so this is the point where I actually go and add the button. So you take any of the 4 holes that you have and you just put your needle right on through it, start it anywhere that you desire. It does not matter which of the 4 holes you started in because you're going to be covering all of them eventually at some point anyway. So now I have my hole in my needle. How sewing buttons works is it goes in a figure 8 type manner when you're sewing it, and on the top of it it's going to look like an X when it's done. So you're going to go hole, diagonal, and you're going to keep that hole, diagonal over and over again, and it's going to look like a figure 8 when you're going to sew it, so that's how it's easy for me to remember it. So I'm at the top hole on this direction, which means I'm going to be going to the bottom hole on this direction because it is a diagonal. Go, oops. Poke it right on through, and then you just pull the length of the string in until there we go. Now, this is where the figure 8 motion comes in. So I've gone diagonal. Now I'm going to go up and diagonal again. So you're coming from the back of it this time. Normally this process might be a bit more difficult if you cannot see through it, like this fabric is a bit sheer, a bit see-through, so I know where I'm already poking it. On more opaque fabrics, it might be a bit harder for you to see the hole. Just keep going until you get it. I pull it through, and now I am crossing again on the diagonal. And you just repeat this entire process of up, cross, in that figure 8 type thing until you get it fully to the desired strength that you wish, or until you run out of string, whichever one works first. Just for time's sake, I'm not going to be repeating the process. I'm going to be showing you guys how to tie it off in the end. So I have my little X. Now in the back here is where I'm going to be tying it off. Now, how you decide to tie off your sewing is a little bit different depending on per person, but I'm going to be showing you guys the way that I was taught when I learned how to sew a few years ago. I take my string and I just put it through a tiny bit of the fabric, just enough for the fabric to be on the string. And then I go, oops, not quite pulling through there we go. And I just kind of loop it back through the thing and I pull it through. Essentially all I'm doing right now is knotting up my string. And I'll do that 1 or 2 more times just to make sure it's secure, although for this video it is not quite necessary. I do 1 or 2 more times, and then you would just cut your string off, and there you go. That is your entire sewn on button. Now it's going to be a bit movey, it's going to be very movable, and that's okay because this is not a standstill type of thing. So if you're like, oh, it's moving, you did it correctly. The only reason you'll know you did it wrong is if the button happens to pop off. I hope this helped. Thank you!